And thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. It's really an honor. I really appreciate it.
Everyone, can we just say a massive thank you very much to Rita for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Dust Bowl Dance, the song you just performed, is a perfect lead-in into our conversation. There are a handful of songs in the Mumford & Sons catalog that relate directly to John Steinbeck, although perhaps none as directly as that one. And it was interesting, Marcus, to hear you say that you and Ben wrote that very early on, right? That's one of the first?
Yeah, I remember it was early days of the band, and we used to do a lot of kind of arranging and some writing at my parents' house, where we had a studio in the attic and there was a piano on the ground floor. And I remember Marcus coming over one afternoon. I actually remember it incredibly vividly. And I was just messing around with some chords. It was like a bizarre rip-off of Pachelbel's Canon in minor. And having a chat with Marcus about just some ideas that were coming from the music, and he became very affected, I think, at the time, to be fair, from just finishing, I think, probably a reread of Grapes of Wrath.
No, it was the first one, just took me like 2 years. Because it ain't short and I ain't small.
And yeah, this song, I guess within about 2 hours, we managed to work up the first version of what then became one of our many presentations to the band. And we kind of do that to each other on a regular basis, where you have the worst moment of this band, I think, for all of us, is when you have to present your work. And we do it to each other and we make each other feel equally awkward.
So what year would this have been, Ben? Would this have been 2008? 7, 8?
Maybe 7. That's sort of late 7, early 8, yeah.
So you're now a band that's approaching 12 or 13. You're teenagers now. Ted, what are the reflections on that? Thoughts of a teenage band?
We renewed our vows, which is a very pleasant thing to do. I think it's been a really interesting ride. I think to have been embraced by America in a way wasn't something we anticipated at all, which we're eternally grateful for. Once again, thank you. It's been a really great ride. I feel like we United is sort of, we met at an age where we were sort of establishing our ideals, and I think they revolved around this dream to be free and to be creative and find our fulfillment that way. It wasn't really such a materialistic sort of hope that we had for our band or our music or anything like that. Much like the lovely guys down at the Flop House on Cannery Row. That sort of, when I read that book, it reminded me so much of everything that I sort of aspired to. It sounds funny to say, but like Mac and the lads getting sort of drunk, the dream. Thanks lads for helping me find the dream. It's been great talking. I remember.
The band has been through a lot of changes sonically, musically. What do you have to say, how best can you articulate what you first started when Mumford & Sons first came together in those early days in West London, 2007, 8, 9, leading up to the debut record? What would you say about the mission of the band in those early days? And it seems to me that is what is still driving you. But how well can you articulate that, the early visions of the band and where you are now?
Well, I think if the music has evolved, then the ethos musically hasn't, and if there is an ethos, it is that we do what's instinctual to us musically. So we're not, although having just heard Marcus' phenomenal speech, I was about to say we're not that heady a band, but apparently. What a speech. The rest of us were no, I think Marcus as well. I think this applies, maybe then both and that it's always been what do we. I mean, usually it reflects a lot what we're listening to, comes out a lot more. we're playing. As Marcus also said earlier, nothing wrong with stealing. And but I think we do what's instinctual, we do what excites us, we do what we want to sing about, what we need to sing about, the emotions that we need to get out. That's sort of, I think that's been fairly consistent through the history of the band.
When did you first pick up a banjo, Winston?
I picked up a banjo. I'm glad you asked, thank you. There aren't many banjos in London, or there weren't many banjos in London.
You changed that.
Right, maybe. I'm not sure there are many people happy about that. I remember the film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The Coen Brothers film. And I think that was 2001, so it was probably a few years before I picked up a banjo, but that was the first time I heard Americana music, I guess. It was a big umbrella for mountain music, bluegrass music, country music, all that stuff. In London, for me, and maybe it was my family or whatever, there wasn't music, you know, it was Beatles. And so that film really opened up my imagination. I'm pretty sure that had an effect on you guys. So that's the first banjo I heard, and then a few years later I plucked up the courage to buy one.
Or the roots music, and specifically American roots music, that was one of the founding ideas of the band, wasn't it?
Was it Ted?
Mike's stuck halfway between us.
I don't know, it was a weird beginning. I think that we ended up kind of, it was a snapshot of a journey that we were all on. There's lots of different types of music kicking around. Jazz, blues, rock, metal. There was definitely various different iterations that if someone had taken a Polaroid snapshot of us and we had come together in 2006 versus 2009, it would have been completely different. So I don't think it was like a sense of arrival, more like it was a momentary kickoff point, and we feel like we're moving, like we constantly feel like we're moving. I think for me, I remember the connection when Marcus introduced me to Ray LaMontagne, and that was the root in. It wasn't actually old, it was contemporary, and the craft of songwriting then opened up into Ray's influences. That was my journey backwards, and I was brought up on a lot more kind of like R.E.M. You know, like well, I absolutely love No Doubt. But, you know,
Don't speak.
Yeah. But we're honest, we've got such an eclectic mix of influences, and we always have, and we continue to listen to different stuff. I don't think you cannot really connect what I think people know our music to sound like with the music we listen to, and I guess that's maybe common with a lot of acts, but especially I think with us. But we do love, I think the thing about folk music that really resonates with us is people music, right? Folk is the music of the people, and it tells stories, and we love storytelling. We use it as a means of telling stories to each other, first and foremost, and then sharing those. And it's a really powerful medium, I think. It's not so much about the aesthetic of it, it's about the message inside it, and I think that's where we ended up kind of zeroing in on folk music at a core level early on.
I was thinking about John Steinbeck and you guys, and I wondered, as a band, as a collective, how do you relate to a writer like Steinbeck, whose process was solitary? Your process is very different than a solitary process. You guys maybe write some stuff, and as you suggested, then you have to present it to the others. But what you do is very much a collective thing, and writers, it's a very solitary thing. How do you relate to that?
I think it usually begins as quite solitary. I think whatever songs are brought to the band start generally with an individual at home. So that whole process is one that we kind of indulge in on a pretty daily basis. I think we're very lucky as musicians that we don't get to get that moment when we bring it to the lads and we have people who can finish each other's sentences musically. And we get to make something which I believe is bigger than the sum of its parts. I think that's one of the true blessings of being part of a sort of creative collaboration.
Has it changed much over the 4 albums, that process and that collaboration and that finishing each other's sentences? Has that changed much from sign on board to Delta?
Well, I really love what Marcus was saying earlier about listening. I think that's something that we've all kind of signed up to and believe in. I think Delta, our most recent album, has themes of that sort of laid throughout, and it's something that we've all tried to do. As Marcus said, it's not a passive action listening, and so I think the reason why we're still so close is that we've listened to each other when someone's got something to say, not just musically, but behind closed doors, and we just sort of lean in. And so I think we're probably in that way. I think the musical conversation, is more evolved, probably a bit more like refined, maybe. And so we're very proud of our most recent music because I think it tells like a story of people listening to each other rather than like asking questions, which I guess that's how I see maybe the beginning of the journey for us, was lots of questions for the world, and now we're listening to each other's reactions to what's happening. And I hope that continues. That's a big learning, and hopefully, that's not really something you grow out of.
It's funny, I had down here as one of my questions, do you all remember your first trip to California? Not knowing that you were born here. So you probably remember vaguely your first trip to California.
No, because I was
So you were born.
I was 6 months old when we left.
Barely remember.
But it's in there somewhere, I suppose. I remember we used to come back every couple of years for my parents' work, and I had friends in California that were really cool and had their peroxide blonde hair and their skateboards. And I arrived back in London with peroxide blonde hair and a skateboard and got sent home from school. But there was always this exotic sort of realm that felt a bit mine as well, where I grew up. So, and those were the guys actually responsible for introducing me to people like Neil Young in the first place, and Ryan Adams. I'd never heard Ryan Adams before. I was like 15 or something. And yeah, the songs and songwriters. So they had a big influence on my musical life, which came from them being cool Californians.
How about you guys, first impressions when you first came to the States? When did you first come to the States?
I remember, so my godparents are actually from Palo Alto. Sadly can't be here tonight. I was like, come all the way to Mumford. But my godfather and my dad grew up together in Africa, and then my dad he's called Bruce Beck, and my dad and Bruce travelled across the country from east to west, working in kind of kitchens in diners to be able to make enough money to go on the next leg of their journey. That was when they were 19, and I grew up hearing the stories of their great adventure together, and it ended in California. And I remember thinking that one day I want to get out west. There was still that romanticism to it, and I think there's a big difference between the different parts of America and what it represents, and there's something about like just the size and the sunshine and there's something about the West that does kind of carry that hopefulness. And so I came out when I was 10 years old and visited them, and came back many more times. And came back, and they had this dream for me that I would end up a graduate of this university. So I started a journey here. I did a couple of months studying here actually. And
What were you studying?
astrophysics. It's such a stitch up. I felt so embarrassed because I feel like it was such a waste of a place to give to someone. I felt really insecure the whole day because I think it's an amazing university, and many great universities near, including San Jose and Berkeley, and it's like I don't know. Did we use it? Did we use education? I mean, like Marcus said, only Ted's got a BA here. Is he got a BA? BSc.
Worked my arse off for that. My joint honours degree.
I'm sorry. Officially on record. I'm sorry.
got tutu, which isn't very good, by the way.
How about for you, Ted? Initial impressions
My
of the
first time
States,
on the West
to
Coast.
California?
Yeah, it was with these guys. We were touring with Laura Marling and Johnny Flynn. We had a sort of English, what do we call it, fee-fi-fo fun tour. It's pretty catchy. And yeah, we were having a great time. We were playing for Laura and we sort of had put too many people on the bus, so I think you guys were like on the sofas in the back lounge. It was all a bit sort of wonderful, really. And I have a very clear memory of pulling up, back lounge crew, maybe not so pulling up one of the piers right by, it was probably the Bay Bridge, I don't know, it could have been Golden Gate. But yeah, I just have this memory of coming out the bus and seeing this amazing landscape and being on the Pacific coast, and just so exotic for an Englishman, basically. Not a memory you forget.
How about for you, Winston?
Well, my first memories of America weren't real. They were watching Forrest Gump over and over again. I think I might have watched that film 35 times.
Why did you love that so much?
Who doesn't love Forrest Gump? That's the first bad question you've ever asked me. And joking aside though, that film really sells America. It's amazing. Runs all over the place, so you see every state. That bit's great. Oh yeah, Apple, so Forrest Gump did his bit here for this area, didn't he? Yeah, that film, I don't know, that's me, that's me in America.
Well, I actually have you guys to thank for taking me through parts of America that I never would have otherwise seen, and that is in 2011. I don't know if any of you saw the movie of the Railroad Revival Tour, but in 2011, these guys did that railroad tour that started in California and ended in New Orleans, and they invited me to come along. And that was fantastic, and it was in a vintage train. You guys will probably tell the story better than I can. It was in a vintage train with the guys from Old Crow and Edward Sharp and Magnetic Zeros and jam sessions all night. But it really planted the seeds for what Gentlemen of the Road has become, which is to get into towns where bands don't usually tour and just set up a show and not turn it into something that has to happen at Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium or something like that, but to do shows in communities. And I met up with you guys in Austin, and it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen was that Austin show. I don't know if it was the first time you guys did that, but it was the first time I saw it when you had the Austin High School marching band come out and play with you. Like, who does that? These guys do that. Talk about getting into a community and giving a voice to people. Austin High Marching Band played on stage with Mumford and Sons on the Railroad Revival Tour. And then the train went on from Austin to New Orleans, and that was the portion that I was on the ride for. And that was just an amazing view of America because, well, for starters, the shortest distance between 2 points when traveling through the States is seldom on a train. There are faster ways to get from Austin to New Orleans. But you guys weren't interested in that. You guys were interested in seeing the country, and what you see of the country from the window of a vintage train is quite interesting. Did the Railroad Revival Tour help plant the seeds for what Gentlemen of the Road has become?
Yeah, hugely. And I think important to note that that wasn't even our idea, that wasn't our concept, that was an invite that we accepted. And we learned to be open to accepting invites as much as we were offering them up. And I think that was a big part of those years and continues to be what allows us to, I guess, grow, because it's like a two-way conversation. It's not just us going out into the world with ideas and saying, come and join us on our journey. Sometimes it's us joining people on their journey, which really was what that train was about. We had no real understanding of what was about to happen. One of the things I think resonated was the journey itself, as you say, the travel between the towns, which were anything from downtown LA to Mumford, Texas, you know, they were quite varied. But I remember the sort of sunrises over the desert as you're going along with an open-sided rail car. We had 14 vintage rail cars assembled from multiple decades. And Ephraim Owens would be blowing jazz, and it was like such a beat, like romantic version of America. It's kind of what we really signed up to. And then having the kind of energy from that, enthused by that sense of adventure and travel, to then arrive somewhere and want to share that energy. We were kind of overflowing with it. The train was like a beacon of energy, and when it came into town, people would come up to the train, we would meet them and play some songs with them, and then it just seemed to, I think the train ended up being kind of double or triple the number of people on it by the time we got into New Orleans. Picked up a couple of drifters for sure, and it was like, it just had a great spirit of adventure. And yeah, it was 8 years ago now, and I think a lot of that informs what we now do on a regular basis, which is to set ourselves something that maybe hasn't been done, or something that might be a path least travelled, and just take it, you know, like throw caution to the wind. And we work with some amazing people who are up for going on that journey with us, and a lot of artists. I mean, one of my favourite examples of that is probably about 18 months ago, we were invited by our friend Baba Mal to go to his festival, Blues to Flow, in Podor in Senegal. And it's a festival he's been running for years, and he'd been a friend of ours for a few years to that point. And I remember we reached out to Maggie Rogers about a week before we were due to go out there. And she was in Alaska. I mean, kind of ironically, but she was actually in Alaska, and asked if she wanted to come and join us in Senegal. And she went and got her vaccinations later that day, and got on a plane and went on this adventure. And I think there was just that sort of spirit of let's go and see, let's go and like get involved, and we don't feel like we're leading or we're following. We're just, everyone's kind of a part of that journey together. We find kindred spirits all over the place, of lots of different ages, lots of different genres, and it's quite hard to explain how that works because it's quite unintentional.
It must be very inspiring, I mean, to say the least, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a large part of why we do it. I think quite early on we recognised that the road can either be quite a destructive and exhausting place, or it can be really inspiring and inclusive, and you know, it's always been a place where we felt very comfortable bringing friends and family and including them in this journey. And I think, you know, there have been quite a few trips, but the thing that's really sort of punctuated our touring life so far have been the stopovers that we've done. So they are basically usually 2-day events, and we go to a town which wouldn't usually receive a sort of a festival or a touring pattern so commonly. And we'll set up, we kind of engage them first of all and just check that they're up for it, which has to feel like a sort of two-way conversation. As you said, you know, it's not a take over, it's a stop over. And we get to curate the film, and we get to, you know, put our imaginations together with the town, talk to them about what would be awesome, what they want to showcase. And it just becomes, again, something bigger than the sum of its parts, sort of a bit of magic.
But there's a consistent element of giving back to the local community and the importance of that. And that's the part that's really important for you guys, isn't it? That opportunity to give something back, to not be the band that rolls through with 18 semis and just, you know, leaves a trail of solo cups behind, but to give, you know, to give something back to the local community.
Yeah,
that's a big part of it, isn't it?
There's a depth to it that I think is incredibly enriching, and something we take a huge amount of joy from, sort of deeper down in the body, and less kind of like the hedonistic fun. Like, the fun is there in the moment when the drinks are flowing and people are singing along, and that's the party part. But I think there's like a genuine contentment that comes from kind of mutual gratitude that we get to exchange in those environments. And we've been able to do this all over the world, actually, a lot in America, places like Guthrie, Oklahoma, and Troy, Ohio, a number of really special spots of this this great country, and we've met some fascinating people, and some of them have actually ended up building webs of communities. As we got into our second or third year of doing this, we found that people from these towns were actually unifying around this concept and sharing in kind of practical efforts to help either build or rebuild. You know, somewhere like Simcoe, Ontario in Canada was struggling massively after they were a tobacco-led community, and they were rebuilding and trying to sort of reposition themselves and find their identity again. And I think that there was such enthusiasm from the other stopover towns that helped give them that sense of what this could mean. And we feel at that point that the concept surpasses us and what's going on. You know, we end up just sort of starting a fire and just being just one of the pieces of wood that's burning, but there's a much bigger story going on, and there's such a bigger thing at play. And that's deeply satisfying. It's amazing to think that just four quite unlikely friends from London with music could be able to interact with people on that level.
And create something that has lasting impact. But also as a fan, and we all are, as a fan, it's a great experience for a music fan to see your favorite band in a different setting. I remember seeing you guys in Hoboken at one of the stopovers. You know, it's like you could have played MSG. You played at Frank Sinatra Park in Hoboken, New Jersey. Like it's such a wonderful experience for fans, and that's the feeling that you get at a Mumford & Sons show. That sense of community, that singing along. Do you like when we sing along? Does that make you crazy? I've always wanted to ask that.
No, it's good. I think we like the idea that people come to a show to see us, and that actually they end up seeing each other. I think that's a really beautiful thing. The fact that we get to congregate people through the music that we play, from whatever backgrounds they might come from, and that they could be part of something that is essentially weird, you know, going into a room with a bunch of strangers and being deafened for 2 hours and sweated on in various ways. It's a pretty strange concept, but I guess an ancient one of congregation and united. I mean, it happens with sports, of course, and various other things, but I think we're intentional about realizing that it's not all about us, and that people can be part of something cool, and we've seen that time and again. And I think we've been pretty private up till fairly recently about the Gentle on the Road Fund, which is the kind of charitable wing of Gentle on the Road, because we've always kind of liked the idea of giving privately, which we have. But in the last few years, we've felt like actually people take on causes or ideas and they get a life of their own, and that actually there's a real beauty in being able to listen to each other, both audience and artists, to collaborate. And so people have asked us lots of times what the kind of things are we're doing. So we started talking a little bit more about it, and to us it's not really just about cold hard cash, although that's important, it really is, but it's more about community collaboration as well. So we've only really ever chosen things that we can see people involved in and can relate to directly in terms of. So with the Grenfell thing, we knew people involved, we knew survivors and bereaved, and we'd listened. We spent a long time listening, and then felt natural to give as well and support in that way. And the same with all child stuff, children conflict stuff. We spent a long time thinking on it and listening and researching and trying to do the work. And it's not just like blood money that you pay because you feel guilty. It's more initiatives that we really believe in, that are supported by a community of people that we trust, and that could become bigger than just something we do, which is relatively small, right? So yeah.
What's next for Gentlemen of the Road? What's anything in the works? Anything you could share with us? Just us?
So we've over the last, I guess, year been populating a website, which we're proud is now live, and people can actually go and follow information and follow some of the efforts. I think in terms of events, we're not beyond the touring part. There won't be any kind of stopovers in the pipeline. We've been touring since last September. However, we are maintaining this ongoing partnership with Deering Banjos, who have been a fantastic collaborator on helping us work with local charities at each gig to donate essentially a portion of the delta between tickets that face value that we wanted to charge and the amount that ends up being the premium that people end up paying because of secondary market impact. They've got platinum, and it's we could spend 3 hours talking about it, but we figured that there's something there that should go at least in the right direction, and with Deering Banjos and the Gentlemen on the Road Front, that's working with a specific organisation with each stop along the tour. So we'll be doing that all the way up until the end of the dates.
That's great. I was wondering what you guys knew of the connection between John Steinbeck and music. Of course, the Woody Guthrie connection is a natural one, and I pulled this quote which says, Steinbeck, on his remembrance of Woody, after Woody Guthrie died, he said, "You could burn books, buy newspapers, you could guard against handbills and pamphlets, but you can't prevent singing." Right?
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Didn't he tell Woody Guthrie that he'd done in the song, he'd succeeded in writing a song about Creates a Rock, Dust Bowl, and he'd succeeded in his song what John Steinbeck felt like he hadn't succeeded in a whole novel.
Wow.
But yeah, he was a fan of music. It's cool.
Well, I can't tell you guys what a pleasure it is to talk to you, and you guys have been great hearing us all out here. What's up next on the set list? Set up the next song for us. I think we've got a new one coming, right?
Oh yeah.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.